Good evening, everyone. My name is David Palter, and I'm a Senior Director at SVLG with a focus on higher education and workforce development. And I have the pleasure of introducing our final panel for a discussion focused on corporate board diversity. As someone who's spent their career working to diversify the workforce and increase economic mobility, both as a field organizer and an educator, I appreciate the challenges that come with change, and I know what it feels like to make progress. As we've heard tonight, there is more work to be done. However, what's happened over these past few years, particularly in corporate board diversity, does provide a playbook for success. Please join me in welcoming our final panel to the stage for a discussion on corporate boards and how to move the needle to drive necessary change. Our moderator is Karina Ruiz Singh, Silicon Valley Managing Partner, Deloitte & Touche. We have Guillermo Diaz, Jr., founder and CEO of Conectado, Shannon Nash, CFO of Wing, Joe Hurd, operating partner, SOSV, and Anna Pinzuk, Chief Operating Officer, Dexterity. Once again, a hand for all of them. Karina, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And first of all, thanks for everybody here, and what an esteemed panel folks that we have here in the room. I would say, just to frame the conversation, I think that corporate boards are the conscience of an organization. They don't necessarily make the decisions, but they absolutely influence where organizations are going to go. And in this conversation we're going to have today, these brave men and women have paved the way for greater diversity in this very almost secret, small group of folks that have an outsized impact to how corporates run. So I'd love this framing to start with Guillermo. He shared with us some very dismal statistics about representation, and I'll read it up, and it's kind of interesting. Of the 505 largest publicly traded companies in California, despite comprising 40% of the population in the state, the representation of Latinos on boards is at 3.7%. Tell us about the work that you do, Guillermo, and what drives you to change that.
I thought you were going to ask me how that makes me feel.
That is also a good question.
And it actually makes me feel fired up. Because, you know, when I came to Silicon Valley, I was this young Latino veteran, and I happened to have people that didn't look like me that put me under their wing, and one of them is sitting right here in the front row when he brought me in to Silicon Graphics. And so, but with the eye for, hey, there's something about you that is special, and understanding the demographic of who we serve in this community. I happen to sit on two boards. One is Blue Shield of California, one of the largest insurers in California, that represent a membership of over 50% Latino. So they understand their demographic. The other is Jack in the Box. People ask me, gee, why are you on Jack in the Box? Do you don't look like you eat Jack in the Box? And I said, well, first of all, both of them asked me, first of all, we want you for your digital transformation and technology. But I was the first Latino on those boards. And Jack in the Box has 81% of their employees in their ecosystem are Latino. So when they said, hey, we want you for your tech, and we want you for, when they said Latino, it was 81%. But there's a tie between the digital transformation, the strategy of the company, and the employees. It's like, how are you going to get them there if you don't have this representation? And if you, and over 50% of the consumer base is Latino. So those are the kinds of things that who we represent and the state that we're representing, California it's not, I'm saying that because I'm not just saying it because I'm Latino, I'm saying it because it's fact. 40% of this state is Latino. It's the majority.
And in the boards of those.
And in the boards, it's 3.7%, which is the lowest by far of any demographic.
Correct.
So all I'm saying is, let's make sure that we're representing the demographic that is serving this state.
Absolutely. It's hard work, absolutely. And
it's hard work.
thank you for the work that you do, Guillermo. And similarly, Shannon, in what you've done and accomplished, CFO of a wonderful organization that's Alphabet supported, breaking glass ceilings wherever you are. Tell us about what advice you would give to companies that are starting up, and what kind of makeup they should have in their organizations.
So as the CFO, of course, I think about money and return, equity and return to shareholders and value. And so as you heard other panelists say today, this case for the business case for diversity is not new. It's old. There's been so many well-respected organizations, like a little one called McKinsey, for example, that continue to do studies to show that diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams in like a big way. I think one of the latest studies I saw that there's a 33% difference financial performance with companies that have diverse management teams and diverse boards than non-diverse companies.
Yep.
Yet 5 years ago, it was like, just didn't move the needle. I know that we can do a lot of data, and there has been some improvement. As Guillermo said, there's still a long way to go. There's definitely been some improvement, but the business case has to be made at the very top. It has to be something that is demanded by the board and the CEO. The customer base needs to demand it. These are the things that will actually make those changes happen. And so have I seen pockets of those things happening? Yes, I'm not gonna say that I haven't seen any increases. But I think that what you're starting to see, there's more and more organizations bringing and shining a light on this. There's several organizations represented here today in this audience. There is BR, the Santa Clara program. There's Black Women on Boards. There's organizations that, you wanna give yours a shout out? There we go. There's a lot of organizations that are working to make these changes, and it's going to take all of them, and it's going to take even more to do that and to put that pressure at the highest levels, because otherwise we're just going to keep saying, well, the business case for diversity says we should do this, and then we don't really do anything about it.
I'll just do a quick follow-up, because you're a CFO reporting to boards, and then you're also at boards.
Yes.
Managing, helping folks kind of make big decisions. And in both cases, there may be diversity or not diversity, but can you give a perspective of where diversity actually really works?
Well, what I will say that I feel like I've been fortunate in the sense that the boards that I'm on and the organizations that I'm with do reflect diversity.
Yes.
But maybe that's also because I'm picking them and they're picking me. The first board that I got on was a private company board that then we took public. And I'm happy to report to you guys that when we took that board public, there were half of the board was female. Every committee on that board, and there's usually 3 committees, was chaired by a female. And I was the lead independent director of a publicly traded company. And I remember at the time, so many people were like, how did you do that? Like, how did you accomplish that? And it wasn't me. It was the CEO of that company who actually demanded that his board be diverse. And guess what? His workforce was also over 50% female. Yes. And decided that this just is the right thing to do because it reflects my business. And that it had to come from the top is my point. That being said, everybody is not agreeing with that. I don't know if you guys read in the Wall Street Journal the other day about SVB's problems because they were too woke. I assure you that the few diverse people on that board did not somehow persuade the other people to not focus on managing their business because they were woke. It's not how boardrooms work at all. So we still have a lot to do to change that narrative.
And I think, segue that to Joe, your experience, because you're a builder of companies. And now you're in these governance kind of roles at boards. Give a sample of how diversity has actually changed over the course of your career and how it's contributed to better decision making.
Sure, by all means. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And before I say anything, Van did a great job of calling out Ken Coleman, and Guillermo recognized Ken's contributions to the committee. But there are two other people from a board perspective in the audience that I think deserve some recognition as well. The first is Ken's lovely wife, Caritha, and the second is Shelley Archambault. And wait, raise your hand, Shelley. There is nothing you're going to hear coming out of my mouth tonight that hasn't been said by one of these three before. They probably said it a lot better. I've been watching and learning from them for years. You are the reason why we're all up here, all of you. And we couldn't be here without you. So, thank you. So, look, diversity in the boardroom matters. And I can give you one example of how having a diverse board can force a company to do the right thing. And it comes from very early in my board service. And I had the good fortune of serving on a public board of a UK traded, a London listed company. And I was the only American and the only black in the boardroom. And this is my second or third board meeting, and the chair had told me sort of the issues that were going to come up. And one of them, we were going to be talking about diversity in the company. And the company had a diversity challenge. About 12,000 employees, pyramid. There's great diversity at the lower levels, but people would sort of hit the screen and leave the company as you progressed up. And so the CEO started talking and said, Joe is introducing me to the issues of the company, and we've got a diversity problem in the company. I said, stop right there. You don't have a diversity problem, you have an inclusion problem. He said, what? What are you talking about? Well, diversity gets people in the door, but inclusion keeps them in the room. You've got a problem making sure that you've got equal representation as people progress higher and higher throughout the organization. And so the conversation ensued, and we started talking about goals and metrics for the CEO. And he had a diversity goal as part of his metrics. And I then asked, what about the people reporting to you? I said, what do you mean? I said, well, do they have the same diversity goal and inclusion goal that you share? He said, well, no, we don't do that here. I said, well, hang on a second. If you're serious about driving the needle on diversity, they need to make sure it's owned all throughout the organization and it becomes part of everybody's OKRs, and that their performance gets measured against that. And the room went quiet. You could hear a pin drop. It was definitely something the CEO did not want to do. So I gulped and looked around the room, looked at my fellow board members, and thankfully the chair of the board came to support me and said, that sounds like an excellent idea. You should go and let the board know how that's going to be reflected and come back at the next board meeting. Now, because I learned from Ken, I had already spoken to the chair of the board and let him know, as he told me what the issues were, what I was going to say and how did he think that would fly. And because, again, of this collective wisdom that was shared and made available to me, I was able to be my most effective self in the board. But I guarantee you, if I had not been in that room, that conversation would not have been had, and they'd probably still be dealing with the same challenges today. So diversity matters, whether it is racial diversity, gender diversity, socioeconomic diversity, job diversity. Being able to surround yourself with people that think and look at a situation differently from you, you've got to make sure that as a company, you've got the right people around you to give you good advice.
Absolutely.
So.
I'll redirect a little bit, Anna, because your story is an intersection between being a Latina as well as being a woman, both of which are diverse categories in any organization, but especially at the board. So would love to get your perspectives on what drove you to make a change, to be part of that change, and how have you gotten success in that role?
My sense is that we all got here with the help of many people, and obviously, like you mentioned, many people in the audience. And so I view that there's an obligation to pay it forward and to think about what G said. If there's only 3.7%, let's say Latinos or Latinas on boards in a population of about 40% representation, there's only 1% Latinas on board among that population. So we're a very small percentage. And so I come from Argentina originally. I feel like I've been blessed to be here and to be able to make a living and succeed in tech, right? And in particular, then, what do you do to actually pay it back? Well, you have to, make sure that there's other people at the table that can take all the goodness that they have and bring that representation to companies. And I'll give you a story. I'm on the board of Aptiv, which is a fantastic company in auto tech. And in 2016, I was approached really through a contact, another woman who knew my name and said, hey, Ann, I think you'd be great to participate in this board. I'm a mechanical engineer, software background. Go talk to them. When I went to interview with the board, the whole board was all men. 9 of them were white men. There was an Indian man. And when I was talking to them, I realized that there was a sort of a fundamental business opportunity for them. A lot of what the company was looking at in auto tech was really about powertrain and certain diesel and certain capabilities. And as I'm talking to them, I'm thinking, wow, forget being Latina or being female or whatever. There's really a diversity of skill set and a diversity of experience that the board needs, because the world is going to software in cars, the world is going to electric vehicles, right? And the world is going to connected cars. So there's really this great opportunity. And in talking about that, what I was trying to do is say, it's not just diversity for the sake of diversity, because I can tell you most of us don't want to be a statistic and say you fill that statistic. But what I tried to do is to say, look, we really need a diversity of skill set. And there's many people in this world that bring those skills, and many of those folks are diverse, and I happen to be one of them. Interestingly enough, I got on the board in 2016, and since then, now we have 3 women on the board. We have an African-American male on the board. But most importantly, we have diversity of experience, diversity of skill set, and diversity of thought on this board, which really brings a different perspective to where this company can go. So from my perspective, whether it's women on boards, we're a certain percentage, 28% or so today. I think what's important for companies to realize is not only do we bring representation, but we bring knowledge and skills, the ability to innovate and think differently, and frankly, different networks, different contacts that are opportunities for companies to link up to other sources of either customers or partners or employee base, and all that becomes a great contribution to the bottom line of companies. So that's a little bit of the women thing and also the Latina thing, but more important, the skill set.
It's diversity of cultures as
It's
well as diversity of thought.
And the reality is that our companies want to see themselves in the boards that represent them also.
Which is why, Guillermo, in the comments that you had made, it's kind of almost, it's very saddening to see that it is not represented in many of the boards. And so I would ask this question, which was a really interesting question from the audience. You were probably one of the first in those boards that looked a little different, that thought a little different, that had a different experience. What was the most surprising thing you learned from that first one? So just imagine yourselves coming in with high expectations and perhaps ideas of how you fit into that organization. What was the thing that surprised you?
Yeah, well, I don't think it was a surprise, but I think what Anna's hitting on, and I would just say is, like, I've worked with Anna for probably almost 2 decades at Cisco, and I will tell you, she's a badass. and when you wanted something, you wanted knowledge, you go to Anna, right? And it wasn't about I looked at it was, oh, she's a badass Latina, but no one else saw that. They saw her skill set, and I really admire that about her. But what was the question
What
again?
surprised you?
What surprised me was what she's hitting on, which is when I was in the room. Jack in the Box is the example. Is when they're going through a whole digital transformation. They're trying to change the experience from everything from when a customer walks in to the back office. So it wasn't really a surprise, but it was like an aha, because they kept going, what do you think, Guillermo? What do you think? And it was like, shit, this is my first meeting, right? And but they really wanted me, yes, because of my diversity, but because of what Anna's saying, the skills that I brought, right? We're not just in the room because we're brown or black or whatever. We're in the room because we deserve to be in the room. And I will tell you that there's this young man that has worked with us. He's getting ready to graduate from Santa Clara University in about 6 weeks. And his name is Luis. Luis told me, I was doing a talk at Santa Clara. He says, this was last year, I feel so lonely because sometimes I'm the only one in the room. And it choked me up. And I had just come off of the board meeting at Blue Shield, just that week. And I said, Luis, I just came out of the board meeting of executives. And guess what? I was the only one in the room. So don't ever leave the room. Because if you leave that room, the next one's not going to be able to come into the room. So I'm in that room so that you could be in the room.
Amazing.
And so, Luis, you need to stay in that room. Because he was like, I don't know if I could do this. It's like that was last year. He's getting ready to graduate with a computer science and engineering degree.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so it's like, you got to give them hope that you're in the room for a reason, because you deserve to be in the room because a lot of what Anna's saying, right?
And I know, thank you for that, because Shannon, that's kind of like your life story, giving back from the experiences that you've had. I mean, the skills that you've built, and then you give back. Tell us a little bit about that.
I totally agree. It's very important for us to not only stay in the room, but to lift as we climb. I'm an advisor to an organization called Black Women on Boards, and that's our whole mantra. Is it's not about you getting the seat. It's like, how are you helping the next person get the seat? Because if you're not helping the next person, you didn't do your job. Because somebody helped, all of us that are sitting here. One of the things that I want to touch on that you said is that we have to get out of this understanding, this fallacy that we somehow weren't qualified to be there. In fact, in my experience, almost probably 99.99% of the time, the person that is diverse that's sitting at the table is more qualified than everybody else sitting there. Whatever their experience is, they are so deep in that experience and so yes, people are looking at you because they're like, I've never done that before, and you've done it 5 times at Cisco, help me. So that's one of those things, is get out of your own head, because you're way more qualified than most of the people sitting there. The surprise thing for me about my first board meeting is I didn't realize, just like being a C-suite executive, so much of the job is like psychology, meaning you have to spend so much time with other people on the board. It's not the board meeting. It's like did Joe and I go to dinner and talk about this before the board meeting or after the board meeting, so I know what he's going to say, what I'm going to say, how he's going to back me up, et cetera. I wasn't prepared for all the pre-work and the post-work that you have to do to then show up and be really effective as a board member. That took me by surprise.
A lot of homework.
Homework and after work, and I wish I knew how to play golf, because there's a lot of work that goes on playing golf. So to the women or whoever doesn't play golf, learn a little bit about golf, learn a little bit about, don't you have to be a drinker, but just be a little conversational about whiskeys and things of that nature. All of that stuff helps in the boardroom.
So actually, I'll twist it a little bit for you, Joe, right? So the question of what surprised you the most. And I think the twist to me that I would ask of you is, what surprised you the most then? What surprises you the most now?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I was going to answer what surprised me the most then by telling a story of my very, very, very first board interview when I was, going through the interview rounds to become a board member. And the board chair was the second round after the recruiters, and the board chair in this case was a billionaire, a Brit, white guy, conservative as all get out, was my opposite in every single way, save for gender. There's nothing I had in common with this guy, and I was really surprised at how we were able to establish a rapport about the company. And I asked him afterwards, sometime after, why I ended up progressing in the interview rounds. He said, Joe, you know something I don't know, right? And he was open and willing and magnanimous enough to recognize where his gaps were and to bring somebody in. And the lesson taken from that, and that's been repeated any number of times over, is to never judge a book by their cover, right? Don't self-select out because you don't see people in the room or around the table that don't look like you, and take yourself out of the running, because you never know. Meet people where they are, just like Van was saying with this MAGA story, find some common ground to build off of that. And that continues to surprise me to this very day. In terms of what surprises me now, I think, and this has happened a few times in the boardroom, the extent to which whatever is going on in the world that is in the headlines can come into the boardroom and affect the conversation. In some respects, that's a good thing. But when it revolves around the shorter term political just the stuff that we're in as a society today, that surprises me, where as a board, you're supposed to be thinking about the longer term interests of the company, and you're all wrapped up in this stuff, right? And it's how people just can't get over that, think about, where the goal is, eye on the prize, move beyond to take a longer term view. That still surprises me.
Nice.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we are, it almost feels, without getting on that soapbox, we're on a tripwire. Everyone's on edge. Everyone's looking for the first opportunity to take a slide, and that comes into the boardroom sometimes.
That's really interesting.
That's
There's still the short-termism kind of thought around how to govern and how to manage.
For sure.
Absolutely.
To the extent, the ESG committee is saying, should we call ourselves ESG because the Wall Street Journal doesn't like it anymore? Just stuff like that, right? Just makes me itch.
So question for you, Anna. You're more than welcome to answer the question on the surprise.
Yeah, so two surprises, actually. One is there's really only 1 degree of separation. And for some of you that might be considering boards or exploring that, there's a lot of back channel conversation and checking before you ever get on a board. And, maybe as a woman and Latina, I thought it was kind of like, oh, they'll contact my references and whatever. But what you do, there's like a naivete there, but, what you do and who there's just a lot of knowledge about that on the board by the time you get there. The second thing that I would say is you're really a novice again when you get on the board. Not only is there a lot to learn about the company and the way that they run the business, a different culture and all that, but I know for me, for example, I was on the board of Five9 until recently. And we had the Zoom trying to acquire them and things like that. There's a lot of learning in that process, and I had not realized just the breadth of situations that you learn about at the board. And the nice thing about that actually is that you can bring that to another board, and you can bring that to the companies in which you're participating. So that, in a sense, diversity reinforces itself. The more you learn on boards or even in your company, the more you bring that knowledge to wherever you are present.
Perfect, thank you. We've got about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask a question, and hopefully the answer is about 3 words, 3 words. For those here that are aspiring to be on boards, what's your nugget of truth? What's your advice?
Someone's going to do it. Why not you?
Yeah, you can do it. That's exactly what I was going to say. You can do it.
Network, network, network. And continue to network, because that backdoor thing is real.
Yes.
Somebody is
definitely.
checking on you in a room that you're not in, telling your whole business, and that's going to either decide if you move forward or not.
It's not what you know. It's not who you know. It's who knows you. It's who knows you.
Yeah, and I think take the opportunities, you were mentioning Black women on boards, the Latino corporate board directors, 50 women on boards, the ELC, Athena Alliance. I mean, there's so many, E&Y, Deloitte. How Women Lead. There's so many organizations, and through those you meet people, and a lot of this is back-channeled. It's through reference. A lot is through references. So prepare yourself. Yeah.
And oh, by the way, be persistent, but please be pleasantly
Yeah,
persistent.
be pleasant.
Be pleasantly persistent.
And
Persistence is fine, but be pleasantly persistent.
with that, I would say you've just met 4 of them here. That should be part of your network to empower you, to encourage you, and to put you where you need to be. So with that, I thank you so much and appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.